I was halfway through replacing the busted fence behind my rental when I heard the sharp clack of heels against the pavement. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Gloria Bensley, the self-appointed tyrant of our HOA. "Ezekiel Varnes," she barked like I was her teenage son caught sneaking beer. "We need to talk, immediately." I wiped my hands on my jeans and turned slowly, already bracing myself for the nonsense. Gloria was in her 50s, wore oversized sunglasses even in the shade, and had a permanent scowl like it was botoxed into her face. "What now, Gloria?" I asked. "You don't like the color of my fence stain again," she crossed her arms. "Your renter is being evicted." "As of this Friday." I stared at her for a beat. "Excuse me, your tenant," she said, enunciating like I didn't speak English, "has violated multiple HOA rules. We've mailed notices, and since you refused to respond, the board voted to terminate their occupancy." I let out a short laugh. "You're not a landlord. You don't get to evict people." Gloria raised her chin like she'd just won a court case. "We have full authority under Section 12, Paragraph 3 of the HOA Charter." "No, you don't," I said flatly. "You have authority over landscaping and trash bins. You don't get to evict anyone from private property. I own that house. I pay the mortgage. You're not kicking anyone out." Gloria's lips curled. "Then you'll be fined, and your tenant, what's her name? Gia, she'll be trespassing after Friday. She's unstable, Ezekiel. She threw out a perfectly usable patio chair last week." "That was her own chair," I said, stunned. "She threw out her own broken chair." "Still wasteful," Gloria snapped. "And she left her recycling bin out for 36 hours. That's a code violation." I took a deep breath and counted to 5. "Gloria, let me make this really simple. You send my tenant another fake eviction notice and I'm getting my lawyer involved." Her eyes lit up like I just challenged her to a duel. "Then I hope you have a good one because the board is unanimous." "Oh, the board?" I asked. "You mean you, Linda, and Karen?" She blinked. "It's a legitimate board." "No, it's not," I said. "There hasn't been a real election in 3 years. You hold your meetings at Linda's kitchen table and vote on things without notifying the rest of the homeowners. That's not a board. That's a coffee club." She stepped closer, close enough that I caught a whiff of hairspray and indignation. "You'll regret this, Ezekiel. We've already contacted the sheriff's office." Now I laughed. "Perfect. I hope you put all that in writing." I walked back to the fence, ignoring her huffing and muttering. I dealt with her before, but this was a whole new level of power trip. Fake evictions, coordinated board votes. She had no idea what she'd just stepped into. Because what Gloria didn't know was that my lawyer wasn't just good, he specialized in HOA abuse cases. Tuesday morning, I was parked outside the county records office by 9. I had a stainless steel travel mug full of gas station coffee, a folder with 6 years of HOA newsletters, and a simple goal: prove the board running my neighborhood was about as legitimate as a $3 bill. Inside, the air smelled like old books and bureaucracy. The clerk at the records desk, a guy named Brent with a ponytail and a faded hoodie under his work vest, barely looked up when I asked for the HOA's incorporation documents. "Name of the association," he muttered. "Fairgrove Meadows Homeowners Association," I said, flipping open my folder. He typed for a few seconds, then frowned. "Huh, what? There's no active filing under that name." I leaned on the counter. "Can you check expired ones?" He clicked a few more times. "Last recorded filing was 8 years ago. Articles of incorporation dissolved 5 years back. No annual reports, no registered officers." I felt a slow, satisfying rush of adrenaline. "So legally they don't exist," he shrugged. "Not with the state. If they're collecting dues or issuing citations, that's a problem." "Big problem," I said and gave him a nod. "Thanks, Brent. You just made my week." Back in the truck, I called my attorney, Cassandra Holt. She picked up after 2 rings. "Zeke," she said, "I've got good news and bad news." "Which first?" "Bad," I said. "The cease and desist letter I sent last week. They ignored it. Sent your tenant another notice yesterday, threatening a forced removal this Friday." My jaw clenched. "And the good?" I pulled their nonprofit status. They lost it 5 years ago, didn't file taxes, didn't renew their registration. They're not a legal entity. Which means they have zero authority to enforce anything. I'm ahead of you, I said. I just confirmed that with the county records office, she whistled. Then we've got them dead to rights. Want me to file an injunction? No, I said, thinking. Not yet. I want them to walk straight into it. You're planning something? I'm planning to let them hang themselves with their own rope, Cass chuckled. Just keep your tenants safe. If they show up at her door, she's got cameras, and I'm adding 2 more to the porch today. After we hung up, I drove straight to Gia's place. She was in the front yard pulling weeds from the flower bed when I pulled in. Her dog, a shaggy rescue mutt named Bucket, barked once, then trotted over to greet me like I was family. Gia stood up and wiped her hands on her shorts. Let me guess, more HOA drama? They sent you another notice, she nodded. This one was taped to the door. Said I had 72 hours to vacate or they'd initiate removal procedures, whatever that means. It means Gloria's about to learn what a criminal charge feels like, I said, handing her a copy of the state corporation records. She scanned the paper, then looked up. They're not even real. Nope, and they've been pretending for years. Can we sue them? Eventually, I said. First, I'm going to let them try to remove you, with my lawyer and a sheriff's deputy standing right there. Friday came faster than I expected. I spent Thursday night wiring up 2 high-definition security cameras on Gia's porch and driveway. I also installed an audio recorder under the eaves, just in case anyone tried to get clever. Then I parked my truck across the street and waited. At exactly 9:00 a.m., a silver SUV pulled up with a screech. Gloria stepped out first, wearing a blazer 2 sizes too tight and dragging a clipboard under one arm. Right behind her came her ever-loyal cronies, Linda and Karen, carrying what looked like a bolt cutter and a padlock. Gia opened the door before they reached the porch. You are trespassing, she said calmly. Leave now. Gloria's voice was syrupy. We're here to enforce the board's decision. You've violated multiple residency codes and your landlord has failed to respond appropriately. We are changing the locks and removing unauthorized occupants. Gia didn't move. You touch anything and I will call the sheriff. You won't need to, I said, stepping out from behind my truck. He's already on the way. Gloria's face twisted. You again. I held up a thick envelope. Here's a formal cease and desist, notarized and documented. You're impersonating a legal authority, attempting unlawful eviction and trespassing. And since you're acting as an unregistered entity, you're personally liable, she scoffed. We're a nonprofit board. This is within our rights. No, you were a nonprofit board. 5 years ago, you let your charter expire. You never renewed your articles of incorporation. You've been collecting dues and threatening residents under false pretenses. Linda looked nervous. That's not true. We have the meeting minutes from your kitchen table, I said. I also have video of you 3 delivering illegal notices, plus security footage of you attempting to tamper with a resident's property. Oh, and that bolt cutter. That's attempted forced entry. Sirens approached. Gloria's mouth worked silently for a moment before she turned to Linda. We need to leave. Too late, I said, as the sheriff's cruiser pulled up and parked behind their SUV. Deputy Morales stepped out, tall and calm and holding a clipboard of his own. Got a call about a disturbance. Someone trying to change locks, I gestured to the porch. They brought tools, claimed they were evicting the tenant. He turned to Gloria. Ma'am, do you have a court order for eviction? She hesitated. We're the HOA board, we don't need one. Morales raised an eyebrow. Yes, you do. You're not law enforcement. You're not the landlord, and according to this, he said, tapping my documents, you're not even a legally recognized organization. Gloria's voice cracked. This is a misunderstanding. No, ma'am, he said. This is criminal trespass and attempted unlawful eviction. I'm going to need you and your friends to stay right here while I make a few calls. Karen sat down on the curb without being asked. Linda looked like she might cry. Gloria just stared at me, eyes wide with something between rage and disbelief. Hope you brought sunscreen, I said. Might be a long morning. Morales spent the next 20 minutes confirming everything. When he was done, he issued citations for trespass and unlawful interference with a tenant. He also confiscated the bolt cutter as evidence. The best part. He let me know that the DA's office might pursue fraud charges once they reviewed the HOA's history of collecting dues under false legal authority. Gia stood next to me through it all, arms crossed, bucket lying at her feet like a furry bodyguard. As the SUV finally rolled away with Gloria in the passenger seat and Linda behind the wheel, I turned to Gia. "That," I said, "was one hell of a show." She grinned. "Think they'll come back? If they do," I said, "they'll be facing court summons instead of angry tenants." I called Cassandra that afternoon and gave her the update. She was already drafting a civil complaint for restitution of dues and damages on behalf of a dozen other residents who'd quietly reached out once word spread. By the following Monday, a notice went out to every homeowner, an emergency meeting to dissolve all current board positions and appoint a temporary steering committee to organize real elections under state law. Gloria didn't attend, neither did Linda or Karen, but you know who did. Brent from the records office. Turned out he lived 5 blocks over and had been waiting for someone to finally take those 3 down a peg. "About time someone cleaned this place up," he said, dropping his name into the candidate pool. I nodded. "Let's make sure we do it right this time." And we did. By the second week after the failed eviction stunt, the neighborhood had changed. People waved more. Some even stopped me to ask questions, real questions, not the passive-aggressive kind that used to float around in Gloria's orbit. One guy, a retired machinist named Don who kept to himself before, handed me a manila envelope with copies of checks he'd written to the HOA over the years. He said he'd never once received an itemized statement, just Gloria's monthly contribution reminders taped to his door. Cassandra and I were building a solid archive now. By Thursday, we had bank records, handwritten meeting minutes from residents who had been tricked into thinking they'd attended real sessions, and even a scanned letter from 5 years ago where Gloria had forged a signature to renew the property insurance policy in the HOA's name. But that wasn't the worst of it. Friday morning, I got a call from Cassandra right as I was finishing breakfast. "You need to see this," she said. Now, she was standing outside the county clerk's building when I pulled up. She handed me a folded stack of documents and pointed to the highlighted section halfway down the first page. "They filed a lien on Gia's house 6 months ago," she said. I blinked. "That's impossible, I would have known." "They didn't file it against the property itself," she said. "They filed it under a fake sub-association Gloria created 2 years ago. Something called Fairgrove Security Fund. It's not tied to the main deed filings, so it dodged the mortgage company's radar." I scanned the form again. The lien claimed unpaid security assessments totaling nearly $4,000, citing a non-existent emergency patrol service. The document was registered under a phony address, a UPS box listed as a community office. She tried to create a shell entity to justify charging residents for services that don't exist, I said slowly. Cassandra nodded. And she registered the fund under her cousin's name who lives in Arizona. I already called him. He had no idea she was using his identity. I lowered the paper. "That's criminal fraud. I already contacted the DA's office," she said. "They want everything we've got." By the following week, Gloria was served with a formal subpoena. It wasn't quiet. A plainclothes investigator and a deputy showed up at her front porch during peak dog walking hour, and the neighborhood grapevine caught fire before the sun went down. Gia's house was safe now. Cassandra had submitted a motion to nullify the lien, and the court granted a temporary freeze pending a full hearing. But the bigger storm was just beginning. At Cassandra's advice, I helped organize a formal audit request. Over 20 residents signed on, including a few who had been skeptical before but changed their tune after they learned Gloria had taken out a personal credit card under the association's name. She'd used it to pay for landscaping equipment, weekend hotel stays, and even a treadmill. We found all that in the bank statements Don and a few others had submitted. The account was under the HOA's name again, despite the organization being defunct on paper, and Gloria was the only authorized user. Cassandra filed a complaint directly with the state attorney general's office. The response came faster than anyone expected. Within 4 days, an investigator from the Department of Consumer Protection was in town, interviewing residents and collecting evidence. That's when things got real. The investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Eileen, came to interview me at my shop. She wore a navy blazer and carried a leather satchel stuffed with folders, but she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've seen a lot of HOA abuse cases," she said, flipping through her notes. "But fake liens, identity theft, and unlicensed property management. That's a different tier." "She's been running this place like a private kingdom," I said. "Most people didn't say anything because they thought she had the law behind her." Eileen nodded. "She's going to regret that assumption." 2 days later, Gloria was arrested in her driveway. It happened in the middle of the afternoon. This time, there were no plainclothes deputies, just 2 uniformed officers and a marked cruiser. She screamed something about retaliation and political sabotage, but no one came to her defense. Karen was seen peeking through her blinds, but didn't step outside. The formal charges included fraudulent misrepresentation, unauthorized debt collection, and filing a false lien. The identity theft charge tied to her cousin's forged signature was the most serious, and came with the possibility of state prison time. Cassandra and I attended the preliminary hearing in the county courthouse. Gloria arrived in a wrinkled gray blazer, flanked by a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The judge didn't mince words. "I've read the filings. I see over 40 pages of documented misconduct, including financial fraud and impersonation of a public authority. This is not a civil matter. This is criminal." Gloria opened her mouth, but her attorney put a hand on her arm and whispered something. She stayed quiet for the remainder of the hearing. Afterward, as we walked into the lobby, I noticed a group of neighbors gathered near the vending machines. Gia was among them, standing next to Dawn and a woman I didn't recognize, probably from one of the side streets. "You think she'll take a plea?" Gia asked as I approached. Cassandra answered before I could. "If she has any sense. The state's case is airtight." The woman next to Dawn spoke up. "She once fined me for putting up Halloween decorations before October, made me take them down." Dawn's eyebrows lifted. "She told me I owed her $100 for a tree branch that fell during a windstorm, said it was my responsibility to control natural debris." Gia shook her head. "She tried to charge me $75 for not using the approved mulch color." I looked around at them people who'd spent years under this woman's thumb, now laughing quietly in the courthouse lobby. "We're holding a neighborhood meeting this weekend," I said. "Real one. Under the state's guidelines. We've got a certified parliamentarian helping us out." They all nodded. Don even clapped me on the shoulder. Saturday came, and with it, the first truly legitimate HOA meeting anyone could remember. We held it at the local library's community room. Turnout was better than expected, over 50 residents in folding chairs. Sipping coffee and flipping through the agenda Cassandra helped draft. We voted to formally dissolve the old board and elected a new interim committee led by residents with actual credentials: an accountant, a retired school administrator, and Brent, who turned out to have a degree in public administration. We adopted a new charter, one that limited board powers and required quarterly open meetings with recorded minutes. We also passed a resolution to refund any homeowner who had paid into the fake security fund, with restitution to be sought through small claims if necessary. As the meeting wrapped up, I caught Gia near the back. "You holding up?" I asked. She smiled. "You know, I didn't want to live here at first. Took the rental because of the price. Now I don't want to leave." "You shouldn't have to," I said. "You've got more friends here than you think." "Yeah," she said, glancing around the room. I can see that now. The last thing I did before leaving was hand Cassandra a copy of a letter I drafted. It was addressed to the state's Housing Oversight Board, recommending an audit of all HOA filings statewide, starting with those that hadn't held elections in over 3 years. She read it, nodded, and tucked it into her briefcase. You just might start something bigger than Fairgrove. I shrugged. Might be time someone did. And as we stepped out into the late afternoon sun, I realized something. Gloria's reign was over. But better yet, the neighborhood she tried to control had finally remembered it belonged to the people, not the clipboard tyrants who tried to rule it. The first official committee meeting took place the following Saturday in the community center behind the middle school. The library's community room had been too small the last time, and we weren't taking chances again. 68 chairs were set up. By start time, people were standing along the back wall. Brent opened the session with a printed agenda and a voice that carried more authority than Gloria ever mustered with her threats and clipboards. I sat in the third row, between Gia and Dawn, watching as the neighborhood finally stepped into the sunlight after years of shadowy rule. A few items down the agenda, Brent tapped the mic. Our next motion concerns the restitution process for residents who were financially impacted by any unauthorized collections or fraudulent charges under the defunct board. Cassandra Holt has volunteered to assist with the claims verification process. We will be documenting each case individually. Someone near the back stood up. A woman I hadn't seen before, tall, with silver hair pulled into a braid. My name's Alina. I've lived here since the neighborhood was built. I paid nearly $6,000 into something Gloria called an infrastructure relief fund, said it was for pipeline support after the heavy rains 3 years ago. I never saw a single receipt, Brent nodded. We'll add you to the first review batch. You'll get a written notice about your eligibility within 30 days. Gia leaned toward me. I had no idea so many people got squeezed like that. That was the point, I said. She made sure everyone thought they were alone. After the meeting, Brent met with Cassandra and me in the parking lot. He carried a leather binder full of handwritten notes and a list of names. She kept a separate ledger, he said. One of the residents found it in a donation box outside the community shed. It's got entries going back 6 years. Some of them are coded, but Cassandra's already flagged a few that match up with bank records. Cassandra flipped open a page and pointed to a column marked Special Enforcement Tier 2. Next to each name was a number, a date, and a 3-letter code. She used this to track who was most likely to pay out without asking questions, she said. The codes correlate to income brackets and household size, probably pulled from public info or neighborhood gossip. She targeted widows, single parents, retirees. Brent pulled out a folded page from the back. This one's worse. It's a list of properties with estimated equity values and notations about potential leverage. Looks like she was planning to file more liens through her fake sub-entity. Even after she knew she was being watched, I said. She was trying to cash in before the walls closed, Cassandra added. That night, I forwarded the ledger files to Eileen at the Department of Consumer Protection. She replied the next morning with a single sentence. This just became a coordinated criminal investigation. By the end of the week, 2 more subpoenas were issued, one for Karen and another for a man named Walter Deeks, who turned out to be the one managing the fake HOA's bank account. He lived 2 streets over in a house that hadn't been painted since the Bush administration and was known for filing noise complaints about barking dogs. I didn't expect to see him on the list. Cassandra explained it over coffee in her office. He rented the P.O. box Gloria used. Paid for it with checks from the fake fund. He also signed off on the lien applications using a forged notary stamp. He's cooked. Why would he go along with it? According to the investigators, he owed back taxes. Gloria probably offered him a cut to keep the paper trail clean. I shook my head. So we've got Gloria orchestrating, Walter laundering, and Karen delivering threats. That's a conspiracy. And the DA agrees, she said. They're filing under state RICO statutes. That changed everything. The RICO charge meant the case was no longer about petty harassment or HOA overreach. It was about systematic fraud, paper trail manipulation, and a coordinated effort to profit off homeowners under the guise of authority. The grand jury convened 2 weeks later. I was called in on the second day, not as a complainant this time, but as a witness for the prosecution. Cassandra walked me through the process before I took the stand, what to expect, how to respond. I wasn't nervous. I was angry. Inside the courtroom, the jurors listened intently as the state prosecutor walked them through timelines, bank transfers, fake signatures, and falsified records. They showed them the video footage of Gloria and her friends attempting to enter Gia's home with bolt cutters. They showed them the shell documents used to file liens without legal standing. They played the audio clips from the porch recorder, where Gloria explicitly threatened to change locks on a tenant she had no authority over. When I testified, I didn't embellish anything. I just told them what I saw, what I experienced, and what I found when I started digging. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours. The indictments dropped the next day. Gloria, Walter, and Karen were all charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, unauthorized debt collection, criminal impersonation of a governing entity, and 3 counts of identity misuse. When deputies came to pick up Walter, he tried to argue that he was just doing clerical work. That didn't stop them from cuffing him and walking him down his cracked driveway in full view of the neighbors. Gloria's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA's office declined. They wanted a trial. They wanted precedent. Too many neighborhoods had suffered under fake boards and self-appointed tyrants. This was the case they were going to use to set the line. The trial lasted 10 days. The defense tried to argue that Gloria was performing a civic duty, that she believed the board still held authority, that no one had ever corrected her. The prosecution shredded that argument with signed letters from residents who had tried to challenge her and been stonewalled, fined, or threatened. They presented the forged documents, the fake notary stamp, the ledger tracking victims. They even brought in Gloria's cousin from Arizona, who testified that he hadn't spoken to her in 8 years, let alone authorized her to use his identity on a business registration. The verdict was unanimous on all counts. Sentencing took place a month later. Gloria was given 6 years, with eligibility for parole after 4. Walter got 3, and Karen received 18 months, suspended, with mandatory restitution and community service. The judge was clear. This court will not tolerate the manipulation of legal structures for personal gain. What you called a homeowners association was, in fact, a racket designed to extort and intimidate. You betrayed your neighbors and used fear as your currency. Afterward, outside the courthouse, Gia stood next to me with a cup of vending machine coffee. She didn't say anything for a while, just stared out over the parking lot. "I never thought this would go that far," she finally said. "Neither did they," I replied. In the months that followed, the neighborhood changed again, but this time for the better. The new committee held regular meetings, posted transparent budgets online, and even formed a volunteer team to help elderly residents with yard maintenance. Real elections were held. I didn't run, but Brent was elected chair and Alina took over the finance role. People started showing up to meetings because they wanted to, not because they were afraid of missing something and getting fined. As for Gia, she bought the house. With Gloria's fake lien removed and the panic gone, the bank approved her mortgage. She planted new flowers in the front, repainted the shutters, and adopted a second rescue dog to keep Bucket company. One evening, as I was locking up my shop, she stopped by with a 6-pack and a thank you card. "You didn't have to do all that," she said. "You could have just ignored it." "I couldn't," I said. "Not when it was this wrong." She handed me the card. Inside was a photo of the two dogs lying in a sunbeam and one sentence written in thick black ink, "Because you stood up, this is now our home." I kept that card on my workbench, still do. And every time I look at it, I remember the day the fake board was brought to justice and the neighborhood took itself back. Not with threats, not with power plays, with truth, evidence, and people who finally